Our rationale for this is for the students to understand, appreciate, and respect diversity. The students will be exposed to different types of diversity, and that way they'll be more willing to understand the importance of it. And they will gain the purpose of diversity through understanding race, gender, disabilities, socioeconomic status, class, and family.
Okay, and these are just a few of the standards. I really won't read them off, but we did find a NIMSA standard that we kind of felt went along with that, and that was just to pretty much learn like cultural dynamics of the adolescent. And then the one that we found as an Illinois standard is the social emotional standard, and that's also kind of talking about learning and getting more in depth with cultural groups. Okay, so as you know, it's like a 10-day thing when you're doing your unit. So for our 10 days, of course, we're doing diversity. And the first one will be to learn what diversity exactly is. And they would do a lesson to start off. We would ask questions and have you ever, and it would just be random questions of, you know, have you ever played baseball? Have you ever lived in this type of neighborhood? And it would just go on until you get to like that diversity thing. And then I would go further on to explain it. Then the activity would be, it's titled The Candy Game, and the way they would play it is different types of candy. When the students first come in the room, they would get the candy. And then once we get into the activity, different types of candy. So say for instance, I have a bag of M&Ms, okay, the different colors of M&Ms. If you have the red ones, you're Native American. If you have the blue ones, you're disabled. And just these different types, and make them, like come up with questions or, statements of how they feel about being in this certain group, and does it make them feel different, or how they feel about people that are in these individual groups. And the next day, we would introduce groups and stereotypes, and that would be just to kind of give them that basic list of what exact things are counted as diversity, and then tell them the different stereotypical things that they have to go through. The activity for this one would be to give them a worksheet, and it's just the stereotype worksheet, and they would have to write down different types of stereotypes. And okay, this group, what kind of stereotypes do you believe that they would have to go through in life?
And for day 3, we would introduce different types of different traits of diversities and different characteristics. And what we would do for this is we would split the the chalkboard or whatever in half, and then the top half we would make a heading of different, and then the bottom half we would make a heading of same. And then just as a class, we would brainstorm. We would start off with the different section, just ways that we are all different, and they would come up with a lot of stuff. Just we all have different personalities, we all look different, we all have different cultures, and you just go on until like the whole top part of the board is filled. And then you would go down to the same section, and that part would be a little bit harder. What you would want them to come to is that, well, we all have personalities, we all have races, we all have certain traits. And then after that, we would make a web, and we would just put diversity and then circle it, and then just have like different traits coming out of it, like race, gender. And then to close it, we would ask the students, okay, well, what if we all had the same personality? What if we were all the same race? What if we were all the same culture? So then that way they could kind of see the importance of it and see, if without diversity, it would be pretty different. So. And then for this day 4, we would do visual diversity and focus on just the diversity characteristics that you could see when you look at somebody. So we would pull up the web from the day before, and we would tell the students, okay, well, which characteristics are things that you could see? And then they would circle race, gender, physical disabilities, everything that they would be able to see. And what we what we would do for this lesson is we would split the class into half, just randomly, and have that half of the group where I was thinking of like those jerseys that you would wear in gym class, like to separate basketball teams, like just, or something to show like that they're different. And then the teacher and the other students that aren't wearing the jerseys would just be like, kind of like ignore them, be rude to them, you know, just not really acknowledge them. And then they would do some sort of activity. I put a worksheet in there, and they would be put into groups, and the groups would be with people wearing jerseys and not wearing jerseys, and then at the end they would be told to take the jerseys off, and then they'd have a discussion about how that made them feel, like how the people in the jerseys felt, and how it didn't make any sense to treat them differently just because they were wearing jerseys. So that way they could kind of see a different outlook on that. And then day 5 would be abstract diversity. And to start this off, we would read a little part in this book called Look Me in the Eye, like My Life with Asperger's. And this part of the book is just a student with Asperger's syndrome, and the teacher is just yelling at him because the student won't look the teacher in the eye. And the teacher thinks he's being disrespectful, but really he just can't look the student in the eye. Look me in the eye, my life with Asperger's syndrome. And then we would give the students a sheet with all these pictures of students that either have like autism or Asperger's syndrome, and then you would have the students write down what they see when they look at the pictures, and most of the time it would just be like, oh, they look bored, they look like this, they look like that, and then the teacher would go through and say, well, the student in picture 1 has autism, and then have a discussion about autism, and the student in picture 2 has a learning disability, and so on.
Okay, and the next week is where we'll get more in depth with the certain types of diversity. On the first day we'll do racial diversity. And pretty much you'll just discuss different forms of racial diversity, what racial diversity is, giving the students the different types of races that are like in lists and what they'll probably see when they have to fill out papers, things like that. The activity for this is just because, and that's the one that we're probably gonna have you all do after this. And just because, pretty much you're gonna split the class up. In the case that you don't have a diverse class, you can split them up by either hair color or eye color, because it would be pretty tough to split them up by race if you don't have a class of different races. Well, they would just have to write, so in the case if you did have a class of different races, a student who was Hispanic could say, just because I'm Hispanic does not mean I came from Mexico, or something that people assume about it, and they could share these with their neighbors or with the entire class, and this would just be kind of that kind of groundbreaking icebreaker type thing to show students that racial diversity. So that's a different one.
And then day 7 would be focusing on gender diversity. And what we would do for this is the night before, have them go home and watch TV for like an hour or 2, and just notice what women do on TV and notice what men do on TV, and just pay attention to TV shows and commercials and things like that. And then the next day they would come back and hopefully realize, well, like on all the cleaning commercials it's all women, and like on all the car commercials it's all men, and then talk about, well, why is that, and like how would you feel if you were watching like a laundry commercial and there was a man on there, and say, well, why do you feel like that, and just have a discussion about that. And then we would sort of fill them in on just briefly about women's history and how they weren't allowed to vote, and then we would do, I found this worksheet, and it's Where Are the Women in History? And it's just this worksheet, and you're supposed to list, it's a lot of like men roles, like, I can't think of anything specific right now, but, and then you're supposed to like list a woman who was like a politician or something.
It's
and then,
like things that say like doctor, lawyer, things that you would more likely see a man in, and it says list a woman that's in this position.
So, and then we would talk about that, and then we would sort of talk about like sex role stereotyping, and talk about, ask the girls, well, what are your chores when you go home, and then ask the boys, well, what are your chores when you go home, and to close it off, I found another really good worksheet, which is called Advice I'd Like to Give My Daughter. And so that would close that off. And for physical and mental disabilities, we would split them up into groups, and then it would be 4 groups, and one group would like be blindfolded and have to do like a puzzle, and then another group would not be allowed to talk, and then they'd have to do an activity that requires a lot of communication, and then another group would just be given like a college level algebra worksheet or something to represent like a learning disability. And then sort of talk about that, and then lead into, well, people with disabilities have, barriers, but you have to focus on the strengths that they have. And then we would talk about like famous people with disabilities. And then to end that off, I thought, well, this is actually Ashley's idea, but to show the trailer for the movie Soul Surfer. It's about like this movie where she's a surfer and she lost her arm. So.
Okay. On day 9, we would talk about class and family, and this is a sensitive one, so it would be one of those that you would probably want to send a letter home to alert, whoever their guardian or family is. The opening activity that I want them to do is I'll give them like a letter or something the night before, just to bring in some family photos, and in the case that they don't have a family, just photos of them and whomever they love. So they can bring it in and discuss it. And then to talk about class and family, I just get in depth of the different levels of class, what it is, the different types of families, and what those are, and just, explore the different categories they will fall in. And then we play Life, the game, because I feel like that's a good game that goes with, like, when it comes to class, it goes with family and all that, so they would understand that, and that's how we would close out the day for family and class. And the final lesson is called the You lesson, and I titled it that so they could kind of explore themselves. And the activity they would do with this is, it's a where it's just a portrait, and it says you are special, and they can write in what ways they're diverse and what makes them different, and they can even draw pictures, make it different colors, and then we'll make a bulletin board outside of the classroom so the school can see it. And this is not a slide, but it is included in ours. Our unit assessment would be to make a quilt, a diversity quilt. So it would be different photos and different things of diversity, and we would make this classroom quilt and hang it outside the classroom as a display.
That's awesome.
So that's it.
Good job.
Okay. I'm just gonna pass out these nice little cards. You all can do just because. And I mean, I'm not gonna split you up, so you can just think of something in your head of what makes you different, and you can just put just because I'm whatever, and you can just share it with whoever's next to you.
Yeah. So, like,
an example would be, I could say, just because this was something I can say I was a little bit, I don't want to say discriminated against, but I guess that's what it was. My freshman year, my roommate assumed that I would still sing to her because she heard I was from East St. Louis. And I was really hurt by that because I'm like, I've never stolen anything in my entire life. So I could easily write that, just because I'm from East St. Louis and it's not that nice of a city does not make me a criminal person. So.
Great. Thanks, Josh. That's a good one.
Short doesn't can't reach the top row.
I mean, he just used the good ones just because I'm short, just because, I mean, anything that makes you different, and that's what you want to do with students. And you all can keep it.
I like that Carol got her.
Anybody would like to share? They're going to speak up?
Do you want to share there just because?
So short doesn't mean I can't do that.
So keep doing it.
Anybody want to share?
Anybody want to share?
This is like a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad you're the first parent that ever did diversity in the 9 years I've taught this course. So but it's a hot topic. And I like the fact that you addressed, they may not have students who are ethnic or racially diverse, and there are ways in which you still are, it's your responsibility to still teach in a diverse way. And I think that was really good. So hopefully you got some ideas from this unit, okay? No one's going to share, at least one of you need to share. Somebody, help them out. Okay, Mike?
Just because I'm short doesn't mean I can't play basketball.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.